2, 1, go. I'm going to do some framing and then I'm going to explain to you why, firstly, citizens don't know what the law is in advance on their side, and therefore they don't know how to act. And secondly, I will explain to you why judges are biased and create bad legal systems, specifically for minorities. Before that framing, so what happens on Gav's side in this debate, just so we understand what the debate is about. On Gav's side, firstly, judges judge according to the natural law, and secondly, that the rest of the legal system also works to a large extent on their adjudication, because they put precedents that then other judges can use within their own adjudications, and therefore, like, the whole legal system changes according to that. What happens on our side is simply that the judges judge according to positivism, so it means that the legal system works according to that as well. Let's go to my first point. Why don't citizens know in advance what to do, like, according to the law, so they don't know how to act within the law, and therefore, like, it creates bad things? We think that, yeah.
Do you consider things like the 14th Amendment a positive law or a natural law?
We think that this is something that was decided by the public, so therefore it is obviously like a positive law, and therefore, like, yeah, it's on our side. So, we think that the judges judge according to what they think that the law should be, right? According to their education in the university of what the natural law is, according to their own perception of what natural law means. So it means that the citizens don't know in advance what to actually look for, how to act legally, what the judging is actually going to be. But B, we think that the natural law theory is very, very vague. Like, we don't know what the right natural law theory is, we don't know what the right morals are, etc. So it means that it's very, very hard to actually know in advance what the law is, and therefore how to act in a way that doesn't make the police, like, come after me, or in a way that makes me lose in a court, and therefore I really don't know what to do. On our side, what happens is, firstly, the law works according to the public accountability, public values, the values held by most people. So it means that people know in advance a lot better what to expect in court, how to behave and the like, because this is something a lot closer to them. They see how other people act in that way, in that capacity, etc. And secondly, we think that the public itself puts the laws through parliament, so there is much less place for, like, the judge for his own perception and interpretation to go into to his own judging. So it means that, like, I know a lot better what the law is actually going to be, and not what the judge is going to judge according to, because he has certain perceptions that I don't really know about because I didn't go to university, or because I'm not in his fucking head, right? But thirdly, we think that secondly, we think that thirdly, we think that the population knows the general values a lot more, since they are a lot closer to them, and they don't need to learn in the university for it. So it means that it's a lot more accessible to them to actually know what the law is. We think, so how does it make better citizens' life, to citizens' life, and why it is more legitimate? We think that there is no one that knows what, like, about the absolute right moral values are. Nobody is God. Like, the values change in history and between cultures all of the time. So it means that the only way to actually determine what the law is the will of the people through the social contract. Why? Firstly, it's consensual through parliament and democratic ability to actually influence through protests and lobbying. So and you can actually leave the country if you want to. So it means that you don't force values to actually the general public when they don't when they don't agree to it. And note, this is the most of the people in this debate, because this is the most of the public. And secondly, we think that the laws are a lot more accustomed to what people actually want. So it means that it's very, very general. So it means that it is equal to everyone. So when when a certain population wants, like, most of the population wants something because it is their own interest, if it's my own interest to make myself, like, the rights, like CG wants to talk about, I will put the rights into it. So, and then the judges need to judge according to that, to everyone they see. So it means that everyone gets rights, everyone gets what the general population wants to themselves. So it's and it's a lot more easy to actually know what we're talking about. B, we think that even like if a government wants to talk about rights, probably like everyone wants the rights, and they're also very popular in the West. They're also like already entrenched in there. So it means that given that rights are given to everyone through the justice system, everyone will actually accept rights. But B, we think that people in government don't know how to like people within the governments, within the legal systems, like the citizens, don't know how to act. They're a lot less, or like they know a lot less how to act. So it means that I will get punishment on something that I actually didn't know that was bad. I didn't know it was a crime. So it means that it's bad because I don't know how to act, and it ruins for me the right for like fair judging, my fair judging process, and it is specifically horrible for minorities. We'll take CG.
So Roe v. Wade was codified because of an amendment that says that search of a person should not be done without due cause. Could you explain how that specifically pertains to abortion and why that was done this way?
So we think that right now the Roe v. Wade is like people are trying to codify it. Actually into law, and on your side, this is where like the judges actually changed Roe v. Wade because there wasn't a good law that codified it into law in a just way. And on our side, we get like most of the women who actually want Roe v. Wade, and we'll probably get it into law because like most of the population in America wants this right. Why are the judges biased and create bad legal systems specifically for minorities? We think that they usually come from the higher echelons of society, right? Because you need money to get you into a good university, to get to be actually a judge, which is like a very advanced state. You actually need to have the right connection, be in the right boys club, etc. So it means that the judges don't really know what it is to actually be poor or be a minority, etc. So it means that the judges with bias, they have a lot of bias against them. On the comparative, you pass legislation by the general population, which has a lot more diverse and have any interest to actually have their own rights, meaning that the rights go also to the minorities. Please oppose.
Thank you very much for that speech, and to continue side government in this debate, I'm very happy to call the Deputy Leader of, no, the Deputy Prime Minister.
Okay. For you.
Panel ready?
Yeah.
Okay. And for the camera, this is a deep fake. I never gave the speech. Two things in this speech. Number one, on the role of oppositions and why they are so much better in a legal system where we agree on the broad principles. And secondly, on how a changing consensus is reflected in interpretation. And I'm sorry, Boaz, I don't know if you literally read your POI off of my sheet, but 14th Amendment, substantive due process, all that is literally written on my page, so well done, you have good vision. Now, let's do some rebuttal first. Because they ask us both in a POI, and then by challenging us in like 6 out of 7 minutes of the Leader of Opposition's speech, oh, well, you don't have real laws, people are just making it up because all you have is principles. That is obviously not the case. We're talking about a legal system on either side, right? The question is just from what that legal system stems. Is it natural law, that is to say there's a broad consensus among people which needs to be codified in law? Or is it there are lawmakers who need to tell the people what to do? That is the dichotomy in this debate. But now, it's more significant because they try to tell us, well, natural law is vague. So A, we don't think it's vague, we just think it might be less interventionalist in the sense that the government isn't required to determine what the people should do, but rather interpret the will of the people. But more significantly, right, we think they are wildly uncomparative. Because the extent to which new laws develop is the extent to which there are new technologies or new situations which arise, which is true on either side. The question is how those laws develop. On their side of the debate, we have, you know what, let's start on our side. We have judges interpreting principles that we all agree on, right? Therefore, we still get new legislation on these things, and like they said, a precedent becomes a law. It's still written in the law book. It's not like there are no laws and you have to go to the judge. We just think they're based on principles that society has accepted as a whole, right? John Locke wrote legal principles on which the American Constitution is based, and therefore everyone agrees in principle that these are right. Now someone needs to interpret them, and that's what becomes law, versus the discussion of, well, politicians. Now what happens when it's politicians? We have a narrow majority in most cases, because generally that's how elections work, where the system is such that you want to be exactly 51% to gain power, but enough to have your own agenda. So we have a small minority, generally working to forward their own agenda, generally as adversaries to the other side in politics, and always people I necessarily don't feel represent me if I am in the minority because I didn't vote for them, meaning if they're making up the laws as politicians and as legislation as opposed to interpretation of agreed upon principles, we just get much less agreement on what we want. We get more people feeling like they don't want to follow the law, and note that is all the Yaron's analysis, which got no rebuttal except to say, well, we want to assume there aren't laws. Yaron explained to you why we have less buy-in. But now let's talk specifically about our first point, why this is so important for the role of opposition. Because humanity has not reached a legal system or a system of rulership under which everyone agrees on all of their ideas, or under which everyone's ideas are all represented in the law. As far as we know, it's impossible. What can we do? We can take opposition from the massive threat it has been to governments throughout the history of the world. The number one threat to people's freedoms has been overthrowing governments. A system of chaos, a system of fighting, literally burning things down, rioting. We think instability of governments is a terrible thing, and it is generally the result of a large opposition feeling like they do not belong. We think under our side of the house, we have overarching principles upon which everyone agrees. Yes, I may disagree with you on the specific interpretations, and therefore we will go to the judges, who, by the way, in most cases, are not specifically partisan, because that's generally how the system works. Their job is to interpret. They are not elected, right? We think at this point, we have a general framework we all agree upon. That is to say, there is some sort of constitution, there are rules, which, by the way, represent a broad majority, because natural law means, generally speaking, people agree on these things. They stem from what the consensus is. Now, whether or not there really is natural law that is moral for every human being, or it's arbitrary, but it nevertheless represents what these people think is natural, in order for us to believe that it's natural law, we must feel like almost everyone agrees on these things, which means we feel like there is a broad consensus. Once I feel like there is a broad consensus on the general principles, and my country represents principles of freedom, of the right to life, as it's put in America, unalienable God-given rights that just exist because we are, then even when I am in the opposition, even when I disagree with these specific government principles, I am very likely to do so as a citizen of the democracy to try to change things from within the system. We think this is massively influential, both in terms of the ability to just not overthrow governments and actually to have functioning systems, but also in terms of people's buy-in, people's willingness to follow the laws, even when the laws don't specifically come from the party that they chose. We think we just get more buy-in to the law, we get more people who buy into the legal system, and we get more stable countries in general, specifically democracies. For all these reasons, we think it is critical to allow for a stable, strong opposition. Closing, do you have something?
What the opposition should do if there is something that she doesn't believe in, but like in your case, she still is a threat to the coalition.
Oh, fine. So we think the opposition should work within the government. We think they should work, obviously, to get elected or to go to judges who are more likely to be unbiased. Right? We're just more comparative than men on who is less biased, whether it's politicians or specifically representing their majority and often against minorities, or judges who are just more likely to see things holistically. But we also think we just don't want the massive instability. We would much rather those people continue with interpretations within this law. Now let's move on to the second point, and let's talk about how a changing consensus is reflected. Because they might say, well, you get fewer changes here. This is critical to note. Things like gay marriage being represented in the 14th Amendment are things that come about because once there is a growing consensus, we have a new interpretation of these laws. This interpretation says, now that everyone agrees, for example, that love is love, or that basic freedoms of marriage cannot be infringed, so fine, maybe it could be that all men, all people are created equal, whatever you wanted to call it, meant white, property-owning males. Nevertheless, we think as the consensus shifts, so too does the interpretation of natural law, because it feels natural to everyone that must be what the legal system means. Therefore, we get changes which are so much better for these people, but also represented in a wider coalition. That is to say, we think the Protection of Marriage Act that passed with more than 60 out of 100 senators last week, because now even Republicans agree, stems from the fact that it is growing to become a natural consensus. That is to say, it is no longer a party issue, it is the point at which we interpret morality to be that. Why does that only happen on our side of the debate? Because crucially, on their side, it becomes a fight between two political parties, each of which can control the law, and the law represents what their people want. On our side, the law represents basic human rights. Basic human rights are interpreted in a way that is less biased, that is less given to the volatility of changing parties, less given to violence of the opposition, who are not happy now but would be in 2 years. For all of these reasons, we get more stability, we get better ideals, we have more people feeling part of the country. Please propose.
Thank you very much for that speech. And to conclude the first half of this debate, I'm very happy to call the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Okay. Two wings at the top that is crucial. The first is to say is that they talk of very, very specific aspects of the law that are talking about minorities and their representations. Note that not all aspects of life are about minorities, especially when we're already talking about democracies, right? According to the brief. And because you don't have delta if you're not talking about democracies. What does that mean? It means that again, it means that rather than their side, we are talking about the whole aspects of life. That is to say, we have much more detailed laws. You have law, and then you have provisions of this law, and then regulation that implemented the provisions of this law, and then you have an order that implemented the regulation, which is implemented the provision of the law. Which means that we have much more detailed in specific issues that you know, that you can actually trust, and you know how you can actually behave in a legal way. On their side of the house, at best, they get on a document very number of principles, okay? So we think that they cannot do this detailed to the same extent on our side of the house, and therefore, no matter if there is consensus or not, they simply don't detail it to the same extent, because otherwise they will be entered into the definition of natural law. The second way I'm going to do, let's give a concession, not even if. They reach a consensus, let's say, to the specific principles that they talk about on a document. Okay, so we consider still you have a lot of conflicts about interpreting these specific principles. Why is that? Because of Peli's analysis, again, still on our side of the house, we still have constitutions, but we have laws additional to this. On our side of the house, you only have constitutions, right? You only have a few principles, because otherwise, if it was so detailed, this was like a positive law, which is the law that exists in the state. That is important because it means that actually you cannot actually trust this law. You cannot not actually know these laws, and otherwise, again, this would be positive. And it means again, because the law is more amorphous, because the law is more general, it means that we have much more disagreements about the specific interpretation. Why is this important? Because we say to you that once you don't have a very, very detailed things, which again, this is only happening in positive law, according to the info side, you have a much more likelihood of the judges to enter their specific tendency, of their specific biases. Well, what biases we're talking about? Firstly, cognitive biases, right? People who are actually more predisposed to a specific kind of groups. People, we're talking about biases from very different social groups. We're talking about ideological different opinions, right? Let's say conservative and in Republican and stuff like that, but we're also talking about, a lot of times we're talking about political interest of judges that also want to promote themselves. Now, let me be comparative. It also happens on our side sometimes. Sometimes this is also happen and it's okay. What is the difference? The comparative is incredibly important. Two crucial differences. Firstly, it is much less likely to happen when you have a law that declares what it should rule. And because when this happens, you have much less legitimation to actually accept the law, to actually deviate from it, right? Because you can actually, because everyone expected you to listen to what written in a very big letters. But the second thing is that is crucial. When it is much more detailed, you have much more external scrutiny, right? Scrutiny from the public that can actually see these laws because they can actually be public on internet and stuff like that. The public know, and therefore it can be accountable. The judges can be accountable to the public, which can ensure that they can actually make their jobs. Which means that even if they have these biases, they are much less inclined to actually activate them. Which means that on their side of the house, there is much more all of the things they say about arbitrariness and about I don't know, minorities that actually get scammed and stuff like that. It can happen also on their side of the house because there is much more interpretation of things. But the difference is, and this is what is important, that you can actually trust on what is the law, and therefore you know how to behave and you don't need to be afraid that you don't need something illegal. Yes.
So Chile right now has a constitutional problem and is on the brink of not becoming a democracy anymore. What do you think would be better for it? To have the positive laws where it needs lawmakers to actually say to them what is democracy, or to actually have natural laws?
I think that natural law will be much worse, because if you have natural law, so the specific, I don't know, rebels or people that actually want to do a coup have much more justification to say, look, this is what's moral, right? But other side, when you have actually positive law, you can firstly know what the law is, and even if you don't agree with it, you know what it means, you know what the law contains, and therefore you are much more inclined to actually listen to it. Okay, so given to this delta on this specific important, on these specific issues, what are the impacts that we are actually showing you? Firstly, you don't know never what the court will do, right? Why is this important? Because we think that, first of all, there is no really one authority. Even, and I give you an intuition, Pam. The basic law of Israel, talking about the human dignity. You don't know what is human dignity. You have thousands of interpretations of what is human dignity. It might be conservative, it might be Republican, it might be a lot of agendas. So this is what we accept to be natural law, and therefore you have a lot more disagreements that comes on their side of the house. But secondly, you have much more parallel moral opinion and stuff like that, right? Because there is no agreement on these specific issues. You can have consensus for political reasons, but still want to challenge this through your to push your moral opinions. Thirdly, there is no really. I also say that you have actually people on our side of the house that can mediate you, right? We are talking about lawyers. On their side of the house, it can't happen because you don't actually know what the judge will decide, because it is a very diversified. What is the importance of this? Firstly, you don't know actually about what you will be convicted. We think that this is a huge impact, both practically because you live in a fear, but also principally, right? This is like against all of the basic of like the rule of law, because this is not actually direct your behavior. But secondly, it means much more arbitrariness on the court laws, on the court decisions, right, and stuff like that. Because which means that all of the biases against minorities, against the people that the OG care about, happens much more on their side of the house. On our side of the house, yes, it happens sometimes. It happens comparatively much less. But thirdly, again, you have much more external scrutiny. You have much more ability to actually to actually like critique him and like ensure that they do a positive stuff, which means that you know actually what happened. We think that the daily life is more important than representation. Please oppose the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech. And to open up the second half of this debate, I'm very happy to call the member of government.
May I?
Yeah.
We're going to do three things in this debate. Firstly, we're actually going to explain to you how it looks like, what is likely, and not some crazy scenarios that we got from first class. Secondly, we're going to explain to you why we'll just have better laws in general. We don't care arbitrary or not. We just care that more people are happy and have their basic rights. Lastly, we'll talk about how we help specifically crumbling democracies literally protect themselves and protect their citizens from becoming a dictatorship. Let's start with how it looks like. So, tell us this crazy case of there are no laws at all. Every time you come into court, even if you stole a car, then they come, did it hurt the natural laws of the car ownership or something like that? This is completely crazy, as you understand yourself. There are still laws in general, do not kill, do not rob, blah, 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 regulations and things. We think that still there are. It could be in the constitution, it could be like a common law that is learned, that there are basic principles that you adhere to. Let's see example for both sides. The 14th Amendment, as said, is on their side because it's a specific law and not a law that is very general. A non-specific law is, for example, in Israel we have the ground rule that says that we have the dignity of a man. That is something that comes to our side of the debate. Now, moreover, I think that what is likely is not people that are getting prosecuted, but rather things and prosecution against the state. Why? Because this is the cases where we actually talk about if something is legitimate all in all. If a law in and of itself is legitimate in the framework that it's in. It's where we ask, is that law, for example, that is could be discriminatory against Muslim actually legitimate or not? And that is the likely scenario here, as there is a real tension between the constitution or what we believe to be the basic law and a specific law or provision. Let's move on and why we'll have good things. Okay, so firstly, we get from from OG some nice things about nice things, but two things that they miss. Firstly, they didn't explain how and why the judges will view these things in a liberal way. Secondly, they didn't explain to you why it will be better than specific laws that can be brought. Let's be much more specific. Firstly, why judges will be much more liberal? Firstly, just for them coming from much higher classes, we think that systematically we see that more higher classes that earn more are more likely left-leaning and liberal-leaning. Secondly, they are more likely just believing in the system. It is important for them, it is part of their life, to believe in justice and to believe that they bring more justice to the world. Thirdly, we think that many times they learn in Harvard, Yale, and things like that. These are the people that are most likely becoming Supreme Court judges. This is the leftist bubble, but a good leftist bubble because it makes them liberal and understand more why it's good. So why will the ground principles that we have be good? We think that many of the ground principles that we're talking about in the natural law will be brought up specifically when the state is founded. And this is super important because specifically when a state is founded, it's mostly many times after fighting an aggressor. In most of the cases that we think about, it means that, and we think that the many ideas specifically in that time are thinking about how important dignity is, how important it is to be a minority and not be oppressed, because these are exactly the experiences that many times come. We think that many of these people were the liberals that can say, look, we need our right to self-determination against the colonialist power, for example. This is important because it is likely that they will implement very liberal basic natural laws. So talking much about the dignity of every person, talking about the equality of every person. Now they want to tell you, but they can also do that. Normal laws, very liberal. But here's the thing: normal laws are not time independent. That is to say that their ability to forecast what will be the problems of minorities and protect them 100 years from now is much less. Let's understand. So we explain to you why judges are liberal. We think that just in of itself that proves that the legislature is less liberal. But moreover, we think that many times because of gerrymandering, people with power many times are people that want to stay in their power and don't want to change things. But moreover, we think that the ability to change when you're in a legislature is much less. If you need to make a legislative, constitutional change, you need more than 50%, but anymore it's much more capital. Why is all of this important? Because all in all what we prove to you is that it is likely that we will have liberal changes specifically on our side of the house. Let's get into some examples to make it even more clear. We think that when you for example want reparations as an indigenous people from a land that was stolen to you 200 years ago, we think that the thought about giving reparations is something not newer, but specifically the basic natural law exists there. It is unlikely that you can give that on their side of the house, where you need a specific law to do that, and the state does not have an incentive to do that. When we think about, for example, searches of the police and what the police can do or can't do, when it's talk about stop and frisk, look, the state has no incentive whatsoever to prevent that because it brings more power to the state in itself. But because these judges are liberal, because of basic liberal natural laws, it is unlikely to happen. Look, we literally protect millions of minorities from prosecution, from harm, from being in poverty, many times impoverished, from getting discriminated. This in and of itself wins to us the debate. Let's understand secondly why we win the debate, a second time why we protect democracies. Firstly, we think that there are many times laws that want to be made, that legislatives want to make, that actually alter the democracy, that they prevent the power of the Supreme Court, that they say that some parties are forbidden, that they prevent voting for some groups in some weird cause, that they change and move the power from the all representative to specifically the coalition or the cabinet. In positive law, it's hard to prevent that. Why? Because in a positive law, I can only prevent it if it literally is against another law that we have. But many times it isn't against, or they literally say, okay, I literally canceled the law before that told me about democracy that it should be, but no, you should have done before. And I prevent that. We think that secondly, we think that so they can say, but there are laws that are said you can't cancel. But look, there are always loopholes in the laws. Even in the United States, we saw loopholes that only certifies presidents. This is important in terms to understand that always there is a way to make it legal to make the democracy undemocratic. I think this is a real chance there. Why will we prevent that on our side of the house? Because there are basic, it is likely that there will be a basic principle protecting democracy. That is to say, for example, the equality, that means that everyone needs to have the ability to vote. That means the right to privacy, meaning I can vote in that way. That means that the right to go to a court and do that. We think that many times it isn't said very clearly, but the judges are able to represent that and express it in that way. Look, these are extreme cases, yes. But even one or two times that happens in the countries, that literally means that sometimes afterwards there can be a dictator like Erdogan that can't be moved. That is literally millions of people living under the dictatorship. We are okay with some arbitrage when it means that the comparative is literally dictatorship in most of the cases and prosecution. For all of reasons, for prosecution minorities generally, and specifically for the chance of more democracies becoming dictatorships, I call you to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech, and to continue side opposition in the debate, I'm very happy to call the member of opposition.
Meir Weizmann Institute of Science! 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 זה נשמע יותר המדליק.
רוצה שנייה להקל על זה?
הוא לא את בועז.
אז לא את בועז? אולי? באנגלית?
לא שמעת את זה
אני
עכשיו?
מזכירה להמשיך לדבר חזק.
אני מדבר חזק.
זה
לא בעיה.
אני מזכיר לא לתת לאנשים מוויצון לשבור יותר לעולם.
Let's start.
We start in 3. All the team disregard a specific function, a specific fact that most countries don't go against minority, don't go a lot of things because there is international pressure, because they have liability to the public, and etc. In both worlds, you still want your public to be happy. In both worlds, you still want the international society to accept you, like if I'm a bad community, if I'm a bad country. So we don't understand what is the main difference. So we think the only main difference in this debate is when good changes are going to be quicker. Why we think it's more likely to happen, like the better and the good changes that are not, you are not able to do in this other case. Because, as I said, for other minority and Armenian minority, if you want it, you can do it anyway, and you don't do it because of many incentives. But we think like bad countries will happen in both worlds, and bad country can like overcome the basic law they already did, because who decide what is the basic law? And like CG tried to say to you, democracy is basic law. But it's lie. What is basic law? Is autonomy, maybe equality, but who decide how to do this basic law? This is the state. For example, the state can decide that women can't vote. The state can decide that black people are not human, are not equal to other people. So we are not decide, we can't understand why specifically they think the basic law will be so good and not like bad. And we think that the more likely happen that the good laws will come from the public, the good laws will come from them. So externally better, and then two cases. Why there will be better and quicker law adjustment for the law with time passing, and secondly, why there will be better life for people because of more activism in the society. So externally better. No, I think I already did it. So first case, why better and quicker law adjusting of laws in changed society? We already explained to you that like bad laws can happen anyway, because if the state wants to do a bad law, it just can overcome the judges, because the judges can just do whatever they want. In every country, like laws above like 70%, 80%, like the Bagatza overcome law, you can do it. You can just overcome, even if it's against like the basic law. What it means that anyway you can overcome them. But we think it's not likely to overcome them like in the places they're like against the society, because you're getting the power in democracy from the society, and it's almost likely to go against minority, because the international will arm you, you have incentive not to economically be armed, not like to ban, and all those kind of things. So we think more likely it will happen when a change needs to be done, and the public want this change to happen, but the basic law and the natural law are not allowed it. Let's look at the black people in the US that didn't have rights. There are slavery because the basic laws that most of the people believe, and therefore most likely the state believes this is the natural law, that black people don't have rights. This is the natural law then in the US. And we think the only reason why it changed, because the state understands that even if it's the basic law, if now we believe it's something else, and the society believes it's something else, we can change it and we should change it. Why we think in our world it will change much, much quicker? Firstly, we think like in their world, in their mechanism, the judge can sometimes like go against laws. Meaning that if my law, for example, for the black people, like giving vote for the black people is against the basic law I already determined before, it's meaning the judge can approve it. They can't approve a law that is against what happened before, because basic law there is no explanation why basic law are going to change. And if we believe with time, like the belief of people are going to change, we don't understand how they can change, because the judges can just not hear them. Secondly, you need to convince less people. What does it mean? That if your minority wants something, or if a specific population in your country needs something, you don't need like all the society to agree. You don't need it to be according to the laws. If women want to like driving in places that it's forbidden, in democracy that it's forbidden, they can do it now. If LGBT want to get married and the nature law is saying, oh, we must allow people to marry with the other kind, now they can do it. What does it mean? It means that it's quicker to change it, the judges are not going to against it, and specifically it's quicker when there is no incentive to the majority and therefore less incentive to change it. This means that essentially you are more likely to have changes when it's against the nature basic things. Change it because we know the society is changing all the time. LGBT community, black people, women's rights, and etc. etc. In our world, they are more likely to get their rights, and therefore better life as CG trying to claim, and therefore also like better rights for minority and all those kinds of things, like Open Enough trying to say for us. So we think, to conclude that we are more adjusting for the changing situation in the world, and therefore more good for more people in the society. Second case, why we think there is POI? Yeah.
On both sides, when there's a consensus, that is either how you interpret the law or how you make the law. The question is how the opposition feels when that happens. Our side gets buy-in because it is part of the existing legal system. Your side creates chaos.
We just don't agree, because in your world, when there is natural law, you must obey to them. You can. It's not even if the majority are against them, you must obey them. Even if all also Only if you have like a majority that can change it. But we want it to be able to change it even if you don't have majority. If the state believes that most of the people, black people, need to get right, so we need to change it. So why there a better life for more people? Because they're more activism. Because we think like the thing that making the state to change their agenda and helping people and giving money and giving education and all those kind of things is the pressure of the society. Why we think in the other side of the house there will be more pressure for society to think? Firstly, because in that now they feeling they can change something. Because in their world, like the laws are already determined. They can, if I am black people and now I can change, I don't believe that I can change because the state is listen only to this law. In our world, you believe that you can change because your state is choosing. So you're more likely to put more pressure on the state. You're more likely to demand for the state to change things for you. Secondly, you have more incentive to act. Because now you know it's quicker and easier, meaning you will want to put more effort to get more quicker the benefit you can get from that. So we think that therefore, even if like not all the people, if the minority of the people believe that it can help them, and even though it's against like the basic law as they say, it will be quicker for me to change it, it's quicker for me to get help, and therefore better life from them. So we win basically on two clashes, like the clashes of better life and also like the better laws for all the society. For all those reasons you have to
Sadly, I have to say that I'm confused. OG say that the constitution is on their side, O say it's on their side. No one says exactly what are the values. Some say it's liberal, some say it's not. Mostly we get it, it's something general values that like we have a huge proportion of society who believe in. So let's take Gav on the strong side, that it's also a liberal one that they believe. What does it mean? So let's look at two liberal things. First, equality. We believe that people should have equality. This means that we can't have affirmative action or positive discrimination. I'm not sure that I'm saying the correct one, but positive discrimination, that you know that some group suffered in the past, and you bring them better job, bring them better money, bring them a better school. Why? Because the most important thing that everyone is agreeing is the equality one. Yeah, this is the thing that we need to put aside. What I'm trying to say, which my partner said, is things change. We learn stuff, and we need to change stuff quickly to make sure that they actually change, actually become better for the society. Another thing that is like everyone agreeing, sadly, in Wasserman, is the cheering. If everyone believes it, it means we can't change it no matter what, no matter if one people don't want it to change. Two clashes in this debate. First, how it's going to affect the changes of rules or passing rules. The second one, how it's actually going to change the perspective of the citizen in the country. Before that, I want to do two external rebuttals. We're from first government about the opposition role now. We think all of their case is totally symmetrical. Yeah? They're telling us, well, today there is instability because you are not agreeing on the things that are common. But even in their world, there are things that you're not going to agree in. Yeah? You are still going to be afraid that they are going to try to take the ruling because this is what opposition wants to do. Yeah? You're afraid that they will replace you. That means you also don't want to work with them together. But more than that, we think that you are just more angry about them because now they're trying to convince everyone in the state that they are correct and you are not, which again is symmetrical. Nothing changed even in their world under this case. So this case, fall. Second thing that I want to do outside the battle is about the situation of fragile democracy and stability of second government. Several things. First, in those countries that people demolish the judges, we believe that they have enough control to do it anyway. They have probably the military force, they have enough big coalition to actually fall under what a first government tells us, that there is enough agreement. They will do it either way. Secondly, we think this is also symmetrical. That means that there is a chance for not like 50% democracy to become more democratic. Yeah, everything can happen the same. But thirdly, we think that when the public doesn't believe that things can change, when you think that it doesn't have the ability to change, because there is no way that I can convince everyone to change as they say that I need to do, there is more likely that I will be act in a violent way to try to overthrow the government. This is the only way for me to actually change something. This completely flip their case and explain why there is less stability in those countries, because the people are going to be desperate. I don't care about this one. Good. Now, let's get into the two clashes. How it's going to affect passing the laws. So, I want to make it firstly, like everyone talk about the US, but also a functional democracy is, for example, India, yeah? So, not all of the laws are great, not all of the laws are better, but we think that they are improving in time. Also, it's not only that they're improving, the natural law that they are based on is something that doesn't have to be liberal, yeah? This means that based on OG case, things are going to change slowly because they need they have a lot of precedent, they need high agreement between each other. That means that it's less likely for me to actually create a law fast enough to keep in touch with the world. It means that less people are going to get their rights, at least mean that more minorities are going to be still left behind, that women are going to get less voting. This means that everything changes slowly, everything is just much more difficult to change. This is true for everything, but it's also true when things actually need to change faster. When we are talking about COVID, about new technology, about war, you need to sometimes pass law quickly to actually handle the situation. Without the ability to actually do this, you are left behind, and actually people are going to change because you're not going to get high agreement that everyone needs to get vaccinated because there is still a big group that doesn't believe it. It means people actually dying due to this. More than that, they are telling us that, oh, okay, when do we see that there is high agreement and things happen? In the US. Within the US is exactly our side of the house. Yeah? They got in, the fact that you are positive, you know, sorry, I don't know. What do we hear from second government? We are hearing, no, we are hearing from them that, well, basic stuff are going to defend minorities into their own. First, I think that this just doesn't ruin all of functional democracy, as we said, India, for example, but more than that. We think that because you need high agreement, that means that, and those countries are based on things that didn't give a lot of rights to minorities. They were national countries, they were only for one group. That means that it's less likely to actually have those laws and have those beliefs and have this change in society. Even the example that they give you to give land to a population that you stole from, there is no way that there is a big enough agreement in the state to actually do this. This means they are not going to actually get the thing that well. What we give you then, we expect you why it's going to be a faster change, where you need smaller coalition to actually do the change. Why this minority can create only one party, which will get inside and actually create a change. Two.
Change from legislatives can happen on both sides. As you should know, as an Israeli, most democracies fall gradually from laws changing the system from within. We've given you structural reasons why only natural laws can protect against that. Even a slight change is under.
Okay, first, also democracy become more democracy through changes of law. If you're stuck inside when you say that women shouldn't vote because this is the agreement and the natural law that we believe in, you won't get it anyway. But also, your OG also said that you need high agreement to actually change something. You can't contradict them. What do we mean here by changing the law? We know that there is a chance, as OG tried to say, that you are going to get back in time because you're going to get one party that will try to change it. We think that it's less important. Why? Because first, we think that once a group gets those rights, they are more likely to not give them. They are more likely to think, as my partner said, that to be activists, to try to keep those. They are more believe that they are going to try to defend them. In comparative, if they never got the right themselves, they don't believe that they have something to protect of. They don't believe that there is a chance. So we think it's less likely. They think it will go back. But more than that, we think that once you actually pass those laws, and you, most people see that it's not so terrible as they feel, this means that it's less likely to actually become back in time. All of this means that we are going to get faster changes of laws, we're going to get higher, better life for people, to increase their happiness, to increase their fee. Yeah, that's okay. Okay. The second case that we gave you is about demo activism. We think that this is something that needed to actually change laws, to actually people actually believe that you can live your life in the country, you like change them to actually have autonomy and agency over your life. And this is also important, but I have your time, so this is it.